Good afternoon, TGI Friday. Hey everyone, welcome to Tea with Ann Marie. I am so happy to be here with you all today, and I have a good friend of mine, and so often I get to talk it up with my friends and catch up and share with you all the great things that they're doing in the community. For those of you who've never joined or tuned in to Tea with Ann Marie, welcome. It's where I spill the tea on business, politics, community happenings, and more. And each time I do it, it's a different subject matter, different guests. And so today I want to welcome my good friend, Roger Feicht, who is with Gunster. Welcome, Roger.
Can you hear me okay? Hello, Ann Marie,
Yes,
nice
I
to see you.
can. Good to see you as well. How have you been?
I've been doing great, doing great. I was laughing during the introduction because my photograph, I'm much more clean shaven than I am now. But great to see you and happy to be here today.
Well, listen, I'm actually kind of loving the whole beard thing going because this is my first time seeing you with that look.
Yeah, I've kind of I grow it out and then it gets too hot and then I shave it off, and so I've kind of been on and off a little bit. But my wife likes it, and my daughter likes it, so it's on for right now.
Okay, well, I like it too. It's cool. I like it. So, for those who don't know, Roger and I, we go back. God, it's probably almost 10 years at least. I don't know. I don't know the exact time, place, because we're all in so many different circles that you kind of forget where we met. But what I do remember is when we did meet, it was like instant. Like he's cool, I'm cool. Let's see how we're gonna do some work together in the community or in business or whatever. And then I got into Leadership Florida, and then we had our journey there, which you were there before me, of course, but you were definitely one of the people who was a strong supporter in me getting into Leadership Florida. So thank you for being a friend and a supporter. And for those who don't know you, like let's start with your background and who is Roger?
Yeah. Well, my day job is a lawyer. I'm a lawyer with the Gunster Law Firm. I do business litigation and employment law consulting. So what that means is business litigation is just any civil litigation. I don't do any criminal or family law, but any disputes between businesses and individuals, lots of breach of contract claims, defamation, malpractice claims, claims for breach of fiduciary duty, disputes between owners of a business, things of that nature. And then I also do employment law. So that's counseling businesses and employees about their legal rights, whether a business should fire an employee, whether an employee is governed by a non-compete, things of that nature. And I do that both as consulting, hey, here's the legal doctrines that are applicable, and here's what we should do to minimize legal risk, as well as litigation. So I also prosecute and defend employment-related lawsuits. My most recent case was in federal court. It was actually in front of the magistrate judge who's handling the Trump Mar-a-Lago search warrant issues. So he's now internationally famous, but it was related to the trial I had in front of him was related to the Family and Medical Leave Act. And I represented a business who was falsely accused of interfering with an employee's rights under that medical leave statute. And thankfully, we won that. So that's kind of my day job. Personally, I grew up outside of Chicago, Illinois, very cold place, and went to University of Miami for undergraduate, and then off to Vanderbilt for law school in Nashville, and then back down to South Florida. I've been in the West Palm Beach area, Palm Beach County, since 2010. And yeah, I do recall we definitely met. I don't recall the location of the first time, but through Leadership Florida Connect circles and things of that nature. And I was definitely involved in that organization for a long time. So, and then also personally, married, to have 2 kids, and very blessed in that regard as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing, your background. So I want to talk a little bit about the work you do first. Because, I have oftentimes have business owners that come on the show. I work with business owners across the region, and particularly entrepreneurs. And I don't know if you have a certain clientele or a certain size business that you work with, but you cover two interesting areas, both the employment law, and I know in Florida, employment laws are a little trickier because we're at will state. And so I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on what are some of the things from, for businesses that are growing. When most small businesses and entrepreneurs start out, they may only have themselves as an employee or maybe their partners, but then as they continue to grow and scale, now they're hiring. And when you get past 5 or 10 employees, it becomes a whole nother level of responsibility. So I wanted you to kind of share maybe your thoughts and some of the things that you see, maybe some pitfalls you see for businesses when it comes to the employment side, the employment law side, in your experience and practices.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to address the first question, as far as size of my clientele, I mean, I represent businesses with just a couple employees, super small businesses that are just getting off the ground, as well as, massive international companies and really everything in between. And they also consult individuals. I was just, before this discussion today, I was talking to an individual who had signed a non-compete many years ago and wanted to leave her current employer and work elsewhere. And so I was helping her navigate her through those issues and work through those. So, anyone who needs help or has questions as far as employment law compliance, there's not really a threshold that my firm will only take businesses of this size. As far as your second question, as far as potential pitfalls of businesses, there's definitely a lot. And I think you're smart to pick up on, once you start bringing on employees, there's some inherent risk there. So I think a few things that I would suggest any business owner or any entrepreneur who's starting to bring people on, the first thing I would say is get real contracts in place. I think a lot of entrepreneurs, they're so focused on the product they're selling or the service they're providing that they use, form contracts, whether that's from another business or something they find online. I've seen and I've litigated cases where, because people didn't spend the time and effort and money getting solid contracts in place, that led to issues down the road. So I think my first recommendation there would be, have a lawyer help you establish some contracts with your most important vendors, contracts with your most important customers, contract with, an employment agreement is something that can be put together incredibly quickly, and it can really protect the business should, disputes or issues arise in the future. I always say what I would tell clients is, a lot of people will just use something they find online because they think finding a lawyer and hiring a lawyer will be so expensive. And I say, that you have options. I mean, you can just take a contract off that you find online. That's like going into the department store, covering your eyes and grabbing a suit off the rack and putting it on. And it's not going to fit everywhere, right? The arms might be too short. It might be too tight in some places. It doesn't fit. And so now you can also go to a tailor and spend a lot of money getting a made to measure suit, and they're going to measure all of your body parts and make it fit perfectly like a glove. But there's also a middle ground where you can have a lawyer take an existing contract and then tailor it to your business, make a few critical adjustments, maybe adjust just a few places so that it's that better fit and it's stronger. And so that's why I always tell people that are starting out that are worried about legal expenses, you shouldn't be taking something off the rack, because that's going to get you in trouble. And you don't have to spend a fortune getting something that's, where a lawyer's starting from scratch. There's a lot of room for just taking a form agreement and making some critical adjustments. The second thing I would say as far as pitfalls, when you bring on employees, a key to, as you know, Ann Marie, in any type of relationship, business, personal, whatever, is communication. And that's super critical when it comes to employees, especially in regards to expectations. So I always advise my clients, it is so critical to document. If an employee is not meeting expectations, that's a hard conversation to have, but it's a conversation that has to be had so that there's open communication. The employee understands they're not meeting expectations, and then that conversation should be documented. It doesn't have to be in any fancy memo, but at least some sort of email to the employee documenting, hey, we just talked about you've been late a lot and you're not meeting your quotas. That's a problem. Here's the plan to get that fixed. You don't want to get into a situation where you're not communicating openly with an employee. they assume in their head they're doing great because they haven't heard anything. And then you ultimately decide to part ways with them and separate their employment, and they take it as a surprise. Because if an employee takes something as a surprise because there hasn't been good communication, sometimes they start to think it's for inappropriate reasons. You fired me because of my age or my national origin or some other reason, because maybe their ego doesn't want to accept that they had problems, or the employer didn't do a good job of communicating where they were struggling and needed improvement. And so that can get into a nasty dispute about the reasons for termination. And if you don't have that communication and it's not documented, the business can really be in a hard position and having to defend its decisions. And that can become an incredibly expensive and distracting process.
No, thank you for sharing that. Those are really, really valuable tips. And I think especially for anyone who is a small business owner, or you're thinking of becoming a business owner, these are definitely tips that you should incorporate. And I always tell, when I do my boot camps or any of our business incubator programs, I always tell folks, listen, at least minimum two things, two persons that you need to outsource to when you start your business. And that's having a business attorney. So I want to make that clear, a business attorney and a good accountant, because those are two areas that you really need. And then, of course, as you grow, having a good HR consultant if you can't hire a full-time HR person. And I'm not just talking about a benefits consultant. I'm talking about someone who understands HR laws, HR compliance, setting up SOPs, setting up employee handbooks, agreements, etc. So thank you for sharing that. Now, I have another question on the employment side, and then I want to get into kind of the business law side.
Okay.
So in recent times, of course, we've had, due to the pandemic, there's this whole work from home, not work from home, hybrid situation that employers are having to deal with. There are employees that don't want to come back to their offices. Then there are situations where I think in Florida, the governor put something in place where employees can't sue employers about COVID if they get COVID or something like that. So can you kind of shed some light on just how things have kind of shifted with employers and employment law as it relates to this kind of new environment, so to speak?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's impacted every industry, right? I think that the biggest takeaway for me is ensuring that businesses understand two things. One is operational needs, and then the second is the preferences of their employees. Because it's one thing, you need operational needs. If you're a factory and you need to produce, certain products, then operationally you're going to need certain people to be in the factory, working on the assembly line. And then additionally, employee preferences. Maybe there's a manager at that factory that has security cameras and can do the job remotely and wants to work from home. And businesses in this environment, especially with low unemployment rates and incredibly large amounts of people leaving jobs, taking new jobs, changing between job positions, changing between industries, employee preferences is another thing that has to be considered as well, as far as making sure that the business is giving the employees the options that they like and the flexibility they like. Now, obviously, certain businesses can be more flexible than others. I know there are some businesses that are now advertising, we're 100% remote. We don't care if you're working in California or Maine or a different country. We want you to work wherever you feel most comfortable. And that, again, their operational needs allow that to happen. And then there are other businesses that, no, we need people back in the office. We need that. Maybe it's because of operational needs. Maybe it's because, they can see that their, business culture is lacking because people aren't interacting as much and collaborating as much and communicating as much. So there's a lot of factors that go into those decisions. From a legal perspective, I think that the big thing for businesses to be aware of is whether or not an employee's request to work from home is based on a medical issue, as opposed to just, I prefer to work from home because I don't like my commute. That's up to the employer whether they want to accommodate that. Separate issue is, I want to work from home because I have a medical condition, I have a disability, that working from home, I'm requesting it as an accommodation under what's called the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA. Now that's something that the business needs to take incredibly seriously, have a conversation with the employee, engage in what's called the interactive process to understand what the employee's conditions are, what their limitations are based on obviously a medical provider. And so that's when I think this work from home issue it shifts from an issue of what does the business want in order to be profitable? What do the employees want? What does the business want to do to keep its employees happy? Now it's shifted to, now we have an employee with a potential disability or medical condition that requires that sort of accommodation. Now we need to assess that from a different angle. So that's what I see a lot of businesses are struggling with. They're thinking about it from an operational standpoint. They're giving consideration to make sure their employees are happy, but they might not be prepared when an employee has a question because of wanting to work from home due to a medical issue.
I think that's a good point. And I'm glad you put in there the piece about, the physician and, having a proven kind of medical condition. Because we know some people just say, yeah, I have a medical condition, I need to work from home. And I was like, well, you got to prove that.
Right.
But I think it does change. The dynamic is different because we, I have employees and we have, offices, and we worked from home for almost 2 years. And we try to do the virtual celebrations and, all those different things, and we're in a creative business. So collaboration, creatively is kind of complicated doing that virtually. But I do know that when our team is in the office, like when we've come back to the office, the dynamics definitely has shifted. Like you can see more collaboration, you can see more bonding, you can see just better interaction versus when everybody was just kind of on a Zoom day in, day out, and we tried to keep the morale up and tried to make everyone work collaboratively, or, but some days you just didn't even know what people were doing. Like we get off a meeting and then they be ghost the rest of the day. You're like, well, I didn't see an email, not responding to a text message, not taking phone calls. What is happening here?
Yeah. No, listen, my personal opinion is, Zoom and video conferencing technology, it's fantastic. It's much better than a phone call. It's much better than an email. And especially when it comes to interacting with people, seeing their faces, it's a better form of communication. I think it's hard to argue otherwise, but it's also got its limitations. And like you said, being in the same room as people for celebrations, for collaborations, for important discussions, there's an aspect of that you can't have looking through a computer camera. And I felt that personally with, a lot of our court hearings have been virtual since, 2020. And, sometimes it's nice if I don't have to drive to Miami for a 10-minute hearing. I love to avoid that traffic. But if it's a complicated hearing and you've got a witness that you need to cross-examine, now you're having, you're coming up against the limitations of that technology, because there's something about being in the room and staring someone in the eyes and addressing their credibility and things of that nature that you just can't do. It's much harder to do remotely. So great technology, but definitely has its limitations. And, I think everybody, regardless of industries, is still feeling out what's the right use of it for us and our team, and based on what we're doing. And, hopefully people are starting to find out where that use is.
Yeah, no, that's good. So what do you think, just based on these trends, and because I think, the employment situation is pretty tough right now for a lot of industries. People are still wondering, like, well, where are the people with their jobs, or where are the people? So where do you see, not that you're, an economist or anything, but from an employment standpoint, and just even more legal legalities that may come up with just these new transitions. Do you see big changes coming? Do you see any type of legal issues additional legal issues that may arise? I know you mentioned there was an update to the Family Medical Leave Act, I believe. What do you see? Do you see any trends, any additional trends, or any any outlooks that employers should be, on the lookout for?
Sure. So I think, from a perspective of employment law, what I see a lot of is when unemployment is low, as it is right now, and the employees have a lot more flexibility, especially now where, almost every business has got open positions that they're struggling to fill. Then I typically see a lot more of activity in regards to non-compete agreements, because employees are leaving, they're joining competitors. And so we have a lot more of that type of activity where people are voluntarily resigning for what they think is a better opportunity. And if they've signed a non-compete, then the employer has the ability to enforce that if it's well written. And so that when we've got this low unemployment, a higher activity of that non-compete. Now, people have been predicting for a while that, we have a recession coming, an economic recession on the horizon. Some people think we're already in the beginning of that. If that continues and those trends continue and unemployment rises and businesses are start to struggle and have to involuntarily terminate people and lay people off as opposed to the employee resigning. Once you have that type of situation where terminations pick up, then the type of claims that I see in my industry are, then there's a higher level of claims that the termination is wrongful. It's an increase in claims saying, I was fired in retaliation for doing this, or I was fired and that was discriminatory based on this. And so that's typically in the past how, based on the economy, what I'm seeing in my industry as far as the types of claims that are proportionately rising and falling.
Well, that's going to be interesting to watch over the next several months to see how, does it become a balance then, whereas there are tons of jobs, but not enough employees, but then once a recession comes, typically there's not enough jobs and more employees. So maybe it'll kind of balance out a little bit, maybe.
Maybe, yeah, to be determined, but I would predict that if we hit a really bad economic recession and unemployment numbers increase and businesses have fewer open positions, right? And businesses start to say, yeah, we wanted to hire 5 more people, but now our projections for revenue are cut in half. And so we don't want to hire those 5 people. And in fact, we need to minimize our expenses and lay off 5 more people. If those types of shifts start happening, now you're having to terminate people, and it might not be someone who's a terrible performer. It might be someone who's just an okay performer. And again, if they haven't been communicated with, if they haven't gotten a warning, if they didn't think that, they could be subject to termination, they might take that as a surprise, and they might claim that it's for an unlawful reason. And like you said before, Florida's an at-will state. I always say, an employer can fire an employee for any reason or no reason at all. They could just say, hey, today's Friday and I don't like Fridays. And so you're fired. Crazy. That's not good business practice. I don't recommend that, right? But that's lawful under Florida law. An employer can fire an employee for any reason or no reason at all. Just like an employee can quit for any reason or no reason at all. Yeah. Unless it's unlawful reason. Obviously, an employer can't fire somebody because of their age or their gender, their national origin, their race, their religion, their disability status, et cetera, et cetera. But as long as it's not one of those reasons, if a recession comes, businesses are going to be faced with a lot of difficult decisions, and they might just be, we have too many people in this department, and this is the newest person that was hired. And so that's when things, I think, get a lot more complicated, and employment decisions are subject to more direct challenge when you start to have businesses that are making decisions based on economic needs and emergencies, not something that's been planned. Hey, this person's been on an improvement plan for 6 months and they've never improved, and we've written them up 10 times and now they've got to go. Different types of scenarios. And when those decisions start being made quickly, that's when I think those types of claims will pick up in the courts.
Wow. Well, definitely a lot to look out for all the employers out there. My last kind of business question. I know you and I talked before about just like, how you help businesses grow, expand, scale. So I wanted you to kind of touch on it, because I think a lot of times people don't look at, their attorney as someone who can help them in those different areas. So I wanted you to kind of touch on how your work and your world, how do you help businesses grow or expand or even exit their companies?
Sure. Yeah. No. I think as far as growth, a big thing for me is understanding the current status of the business, and then where their, and where their target is, and helping them bridge that gap. And I had a client once say that was a real nice compliment was, Roger, you helped me identify where the legal risks are, advise me of the options, and then as the owner, I get to pick how much risk I want to take out. Maybe I want to take more risk with this, taking on this new contract, but I want to minimize my risk as it comes to employment issues. And so, and I can work with any size business to help understand, hey, here's where you are, here's where you want to be, and here's the different options you have to put in place to put in legal protections. Because so much of what I do as a lawyer is building the structures in place to minimize risk in the future. But some businesses are growing so rapidly or have, limited resources that they say, okay, I understand that. Here's the risks I can take and can afford to take, and here are the risks I can't afford to take. But like you said earlier, businesses should have, a strong set of operating documents and formation documents, especially when there are multiple owners involved. I see too many cases where people get together and form a business, they're best of friends, and then years later, disagreements come up and personalities start to become conflicting, and it can get incredibly ugly. And so the way I can help businesses grow is make sure they have the structures in place. They've got rock solid agreements, so everybody knows who has what rights. If there are disagreements, how do we resolve them quickly and efficiently? And so that's how I kind of help businesses grow. As far as if someone's in a situation where they're trying to exit, I mean, there's different types of exits. Our firm definitely helps a lot of businesses, especially due to our location in Florida, people with businesses all over the world, really, that are coming to Florida to retire, and now they're ready to sell their business. And so we have incredible, strong relationships with larger corporations that may be interested in an acquisition, with, people in the finance world, with people in different, business groups that can help people find whether they're interested in merging or acquiring certain assets or engaging in a transaction, to help someone exit from their business they've built up. And then if someone's an employee and looking to exit from their business, I do a ton of that as well, consulting with someone, whether it's someone in sales, whether it's someone in the medical field, no matter what the business is. If they're looking to transition away from their employer, it's smart to understand, especially if there's a written contract in place, if they've got limitations, what they should be doing to minimize the risk of getting in a dispute, so that exit is a smooth transition to their next opportunity.
That's good to know. I didn't, and I'm glad you actually shed light on the work that you also do with individuals, because I only thought of you from a business to business professional and not working with individuals, because individuals do have these challenges, especially independent contractors as well. So I'm glad you shed that light on those areas. So this has been so much fun. I know we can talk about this all day long, but I want to know what else is happening in Roger's world? What are you doing in the community? Because I feel like I've only been this robot for the last 2 years, where I've just been work, home, sleep, work, home, sleep. So I haven't seen a lot of people in person in a couple of years. And so I'm kind of playing catch up. And so I want to what's happening in your world?
Sure. Yeah. Excited to talk about that as well. I share some of those comments of being kind of out of the community for a little while in 2020, certainly. I was involved in leadership Palm Beach County. And so as an alumni of that organization, I'm still actively involved in that organization through the Bar Association as a lawyer. I'm very involved in the Palm Beach County Bar Association, 2 particular subcommittees that I'm involved with is the Professionalism Committee, as well as the Judicial Relations Committee. So those are committees of our local bar association that works with the judges and the lawyers in different respects. So those kind of my main community activities. They're somewhat limited because I've got a 5-month-old little baby boy, so I'm doing a lot of diaper changes on my.
Congratulations!
Thank you very much. So, a lot of time spent with the family as well, especially over the last several months. So that's my other job is, cleaning bottles, changing diapers, and being dad.
Absolutely. Well, that's an amazing job to have. Congratulations to you and your wife on your newest addition to the family. And, it's always so good catching up with you. We don't miss a beat when we do catch up, and hopefully we can, do this over lunch soon.
Absolutely. Name the time and place. I'll be there.
Absolutely. So is there anything else you'd like to share? How can, those who listen, you really dropped a lot of gems today, Roger. I think for anyone out there who may need your help, your service, we definitely want to point them in the right direction on how they can find you. So we do have a link scrolling at the bottom, but I want to hear from you, Roger. How can people get in touch with the amazing Roger?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So the link to my bio is scrolling on the string there. Feel free to email me. My email is R, then my last name, Feicht @gunster.com. So rfeicht@gunster.com. Email is probably the quickest way to get in touch with me. But if you click on that link to my bio, there's my telephone number as well. And happy to talk with anyone that's interested in growing their business, putting in agreements in place, dealing with employment issues, and certainly if they have any potential litigation issues that they need to discuss. My favorite thing is to be in the courtroom, arguing in front of judges and juries. But I know clients they want to stay as far away from that courtroom as they can. And so I try to use a lot of those skills that I have in the courtroom to minimize the risk that people ever end up at that situation. And so, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so let's do what we can to prevent issues on the front end, prevent issues amongst the owners, prevent issues with employees, prevent issues with those we do business with, and happy to help anyone navigate through all those dangerous waters.
Absolutely. Well, I know personally, I want to stay out of the courtroom. I don't want to be navigating through any of that. So it is definitely better to prevent it from happening by having a good, solid attorney on your team, as well as having the proper, not just having a good, solid attorney, listening to your attorney. So you got to listen to the attorney, listen to the professionals that you hire, and actually do what they say. So Roger, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being a guest on Tea with Ann Marie, where we spill the tea on business, politics, and community happenings. Of course, today we were really focused on business, and you really dropped a lot of good information. And anyone who is listening, please share this video. Of course, listen to it from the beginning if you joined late. And then also be sure to, if you have any legal needs, reach out to Roger and see how he can help you in your business or your organization. Or if you're an individual, as he stated before, that needs any of these types of services or consulting, please feel free to reach out to Roger, my good friend. So good to see you.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to catching up with you in person with a lunch as soon as we can.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in again to another episode of Tea with Ann Marie, where I spill the tea on business, politics, community happenings. And until next time, please be safe. Remember to live out loud, love unconditionally, laugh a lot, and live audaciously. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful Friday, everyone.